welcome to SOCA 3780, Leading Social Change, Applying Critical Theories in Critical Times, which is the third year course offered as a compulsory course, and it's in sociology and anthropology. I don't know how many people here are doing sociology and anthropology as their own major. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Well, okay, maybe we can have a bit of a, okay, possibly you too. Yeah, we'll introduce ourselves to the class and yeah. Yeah, my name is Mohammed Hosseini. I don't know how many of you have already done a course with me. You've done, okay, yes, that must have been SOCA 2400, the, yeah, future societies. Yeah, okay. That helps, but your life shouldn't be dependent on doing that course with me. Another course that must be possibly playing some role in making this one a little bit easier to do is the course, I think the code was SOX 2200, which is kind of a pure theory, Michel Foucault, Bourdieu. How many people have done that? Okay. Okay, that would be nice to know where you guys are coming from in terms of your majors and things like that. Yeah, so it's a little bit heavy on theory. It's too abstract. It used to be, not that I made it too abstract. I just changed the topic. This is the first time, as I mentioned in my email, that I'm teaching this one. This course is given to me. So me being me, every teacher, you know, they contribute to the program based on their own capacities, but also they have to make sure the course would align well with the rest of the program, of course. I have redesigned it thoroughly, completely, the idea that came to my mind, I have recently published a book which is half-cooked kind of theory argument with a friend from Helsinki. And it's about capitalism, value, and those sort of things that will become more familiar later on. I thought, okay, well, why not? Why not actually sharing that experience? Because it's an ongoing experience. In most programs, most universities, neoliberal corporatized universities, teachers are turned into technicians. What do I mean by that? They normally go and read the already existing texts. Very rarely they have themselves published anything that can be taught. And they try to decipher it and then help the students to understand it. And then they present it to the class, and the class is supposed to understand it. And then the class is supposed to prove that they're capable of understanding the text and also applying it in some case studies, perhaps. So I thought, okay, we're not sharing that experience of developing a new theory, putting everyone, including myself, on the forefront and seeing what happens. And of course, I'm very well aware of the very peculiar situation that is going on. I definitely understand if people struggle, and I value the efforts, as I mentioned, not just the outcome. If I see that the efforts are made in order to achieve the outcome, you're not going to be penalized because the outcome is not what is expected. I mean, the good thing is that the outcome is not fully 100% expected with certainty. Because it's, as I said, it's a project under construction, right? And we would like to actually see how we can, our collective effort is going to help this process going or moving forward, or maybe it fails. So let's see what happens. And it may sound a little bit peculiar and maybe not that usual. Am I right to think that way? Because I haven't done other courses that you do. But this was quite common maybe up to few decades ago, when actually many teachers had enough time to deeply reflect on their own topics in the field and bring their own thoughts and ideas to the class, sharing it with the students. If you look at, for instance, what Michel Foucault has done, or other great thinkers of, of social sciences have done, they were not like teaching the stuff already produced by their predecessors and then going back to their offices and doing something different, a new thing. They were sharing their own new thoughts. And they're in doing that, in that process, they were also reflecting on the works of the others. You see that, for instance, one giant sociologist is actually the student of another giant sociologist. That's because of that process. But we have already killed the universities, and we have already killed that kind of original thinking. And we might not feel very comfortable with that, unfortunately, because the students are turned into the customers and the teachers are the service deliverers. Okay, we start with first thinking about the goal, the purpose, what we want to do in each one of those assignments. Okay, assignment by assignment. And then we seek help from the existing materials to the extent that we have the resources and the time and so on, and the energy. Okay, so this way, it depends on us to some extent, but also I make sure that adequate consultation of the resources would result in good outcomes. Okay, well, welcome to the course. And as I have said in this slide, at a time when our world faces unparalleled social and ecological crisis, the need to understand and challenge the underlying structures of capitalism has never been more urgent. We are at the critical juncture where profound socioeconomic changes are necessary to address global inequalities, environmental degradation, and pervasive influence of capital on every aspect of life. And through this course, we want to equip ourselves with the theoretical tools and practical insights needed to engage with these complex issues and envision alternative futures. So that's a very mouthful. Possibly it's giving you a bit of a dizziness. But what do we exactly mean by this? I'm trying to refer to two things. And this is one of the skills we try to develop. Try to put our fears of dealing with abstract argumentations and trying to develop the skills to decipher them, to understand them, and relate them to the real world. So in this short paragraph, there are two major things I'm trying to address. One is that capital or capitalism has become very dominant worldwide, right? And the second point is that we're dealing with crises that are very much interrelated. They're very global, but also affect each localities differently. And they seem to be too structural, too big, too giant to address them locally or nationally or through using the existing policy means and politics, right? So let's reflect a little bit more on these two issues that are embedded in that little text. One, when we say capital or capitalism has become dominant, what do we mean by that? Is that true? Can we say that? And the second one, I mean, how giant and how big the crises are, what type or what nature they are, and is it fair to relate them to capital or capitalism? That seems to be what I'm trying to make a connection, a correlation between the dominance of capital. And the argument is, as what every leftist would say, that as far as capital rules, therefore we have these global problems. So to what extent these are the presumptions, these are the assumptions that underpin the entire course and also the other course that we will do. So to what extent we can defend this through presumptions. First thing first, in terms of the dominance of capital. Okay, well, of course, depends on how we define capital or capitalism. Let's look at the environment around us. It could be inside your bedroom. It could be here, anywhere you walk. What are we surrounded with? What do we see? A lot of stuff, right? The buildings, tables, computers, everything that we can call them a stuff. But when later we will call them commodity, and that shouldn't be confused with the commodity markets that commodity markets about the raw materials like oil, gas, minerals, those sort of things, or vegetables. Commodity is a very general term we refer to anything that is produced through the capitalist process. Okay, not every good. If that's locally produced, that's not commodity. Commodity is a good that is produced to be exchanged on the market, a capitalist market. Okay, so we are surrounded by what? A lot of stuff, commodities. Where do they come from? Let's reflect on them. Where do they come from? Who made them? Who is making money out of them? Think of most of them. Yeah.
Some big companies are usually part of some group, and this group is part of some bigger conglomerate, maybe. And this is all.
Yeah, look at this one, Dell, right? Those are all of maybe the subsidiaries or subcontractors to giant corporations that were mobile. The furnitures are not locally made anymore. Our clothes are not locally made anymore. Who owns that? Who owns the production? Who rules and controls and owns the means of production of such a stuff?
Would commodity only be thought of as a privatization of the private market?
Yes, yeah. That's one of the defining elements of it. If that is, for instance, I bring some vegetable from my backyard, that's not a commodity. And very rarely you see such things. You have to search for a shop that sells local organic stuff, right? But as soon as you just come out to buy your groceries, you end up in Coles or Woolworths, right? Big corporations. They of course buy from the local producers as well, but then they own that, and therefore they also normally, most of the times, they are the ones that determine the price for both the producer and the consumer, right? So and you travel all across the world. I come from Iran. It's a developing country in the Middle East. It sometimes causes troubles for the Western countries. But I remember 2-3 decades ago when I was traveling back home. Oh my God, the cucumber tasted like cucumber. The orange tasted like orange. Here, when I was coming and comparing it, the taste was not there. Why? Because most of the production back there was very local, mediated and brought by the local businessmen to the towns. We were so healthy. We were not actually worried about our cholesterols because not many people had private transport. We had to walk a lot. We had to use bicycles. When we were going to the local shop to buy yogurt, we were asking for more fat on the top of it, and the milk more fat on the top of the milk. And everything was really tasting like it was supposed to taste. Now, every time I travel back every 2 years or 3 years back to visit my parents, the taste is becoming more and more similar to the taste of the food here. Maybe I'm losing my taste bud, but also I think that's also shared with my younger daughter. So it's yeah, I can see that as the country is becoming more and more industrialized and more absorbed into trade with other countries and mass production, and the companies are growing there as well. things are becoming more less organic and and dominated by those who have monopolies over the production, export, and import. Okay, so that's. I hope that that might. Are you finding this argument a little bit convincing that capital is kind of being dominant? Yeah. Okay. How about the nature of the global problems we have? Again, they sound very giant, very interrelated, multifaceted. And I wrote a very short piece, and I added something that the AI produces, those images. That was a coin. On one side of the coin, there was Palestine, and on the other side was a barren land. Very dry land. And I wrote something like this, that the ecocide and genocide are two sides of one coin. Okay, we see well, genocides, whether it happens in Ukraine, that we might have more sympathy because they might look a little bit more closely to us, or it happens in Palestine, doesn't matter. We see that the polarization is happening. A lot of bad things are happening in Sudan, in Yemen, in many other places, that we may call them genocide, or as ICG called them, plausibly genocide. But also we see climate change, it's growing, it's becoming bigger and bigger. The IPCC reports that came out are very scary. They're telling us that by the end of this decade, millions of Africans have to be actually to be displaced, to move, because the food production systems are going to collapse. So and then how these two could be related. Look at the BDS movement. Anyone is familiar with the BDS movement that is currently going on? Whether we have sympathy or not, whether we consider Palestine as a genocide or not, I'm just trying to make the argument, okay? The BDS is, what is it? Yeah, boycott, disclose, sanction. It's a response to what is happening in Palestine against the Zionist or Israeli corporations. If you look at the list of the companies that they have listed to boycott, what type of companies we find in there? Coca-Cola, Pepsi, even Yes Optus. They all have kind of ties. A student encampment here wants the university to demilitarize, and also they want the university to disclose their ties with the weapon manufacturers that are actually contributing to this horrendous crime against humanity. So according to them, so if you look at the list of these corporations, you see that they are the ones that have very big interest in the status quo going on. They're the ones that also, you can see, also find the names of the fossil fuel companies and so on and so forth. So the same corporations that are contributing to ecocide are the ones that also are contributing to weapon making lots of monies out of making weapons and selling them out of the conflict. So the more conflict we have in the world, the more prosperous such companies will become. And they're so interrelated. Their shares are so interrelated, and their shareholders are, there are big overlaps between their short shareholders and so on and so forth. And we shouldn't just blame them. Actually, I was looking at my super, and where my super is actually invested. It's invested in many of such companies. So me talking against these corporations and having a negative attitudes about them, and also against genocide, I'm kind of complicit, to be honest. And I can't do much about it. And I wrote a letter to them, and I asked my super, uni super, to tell me where my money is going, and the response was so vague. Many people received no response. So you see that a lot of us are taken into this. We are also kind of, whether we like it or not, partially are complicit to this. And so maybe this has some, let's just stop the political rhetoric and get back to the business. How are we going to relate this to theory? I mean, how would social theory help us to get our heads around these complexities, these interrelations? Are we satisfied with the already existing theories that talk a lot about all sorts of things, but still we're not getting the idea about what's going on? So what are the implications of the situation that we are in for the way we understand the reality, for the way that we theorize reality? Maybe if the social theory hasn't been able to help us understand, maybe we have to actually go back and revisit theory. That's what always we have been doing, actually, in social sciences. When the capitalist system was very much dominant in the universities in this first half of 20th century. If you look at the types of social theories that were all about functionalism, structuralism, and everything is already predetermined and no one has an agency and the society works like a machine. But then when we reach the 60s and 70s, what do we see? Completely, because social movements are coming out, civil rights movements, feminist movements, women's movements, queers movements, all sorts of movements are challenging the system. And as the result of that, we see that the social theory also changes. Social theory starts to question functionalism, and you see the rise of people like Foucault, Bourdieu, postmodern philosophers, and so on and so forth. Prior to that, back in the late 19th century, again, when capitalism was so brutal, putting people into work, even including children and women for more than 14 hours a day, you see the rise of Marxist theories. So you see that social theory keeps changing. And it's very much interrelated, not only with the context that keeps changing, the situation, the condition, but also people's responses, the movements. So it won't take that many years to see that, for instance, maybe the next cohort of people in the next 5 or 10 years, they will be studying the genocide in Palestine, and nobody would be just keeping it to themselves. So that would be safe to put them into the textbook and study that. But then you see that the social theory would also keep changing accordingly. Okay, I have a habit of talking too much on just one slide. Okay, yeah, how satisfactory the theory is. Yeah, okay. Now, what's the problem with the social theory that we have, and why we think it's not satisfactory? One problem with social theory, as you might have already done, realized if you've done that SOX 2200, it's very critical of the current situation. It criticizes it to death, right? But it doesn't tell you what to do, how we're going to transform it. Well, we read Michel Foucault, we know where the sexual oppression comes from. We read Bourdieu, we understand how culture plays role in creating social stratification and divisions in the societies. And it's not all about money, but also about your social capital, your cultural capital, your symbolic capital, your identity, and so on and so forth. We understand that. That's fine. That's great. That's good to know where the problems come from. But how are we going to transform this society? What's the plan? And well, that plan is left to the people to decide in their social movements, in political parties, in their involvement in the politics. I'm a critical thinker here. I have the advantage of living in my ivory tower without, getting my hands dirty in any politics or involving in the encampment. That encampment is done by the students. I teach them this situation is awful, but it's up to the student to go to the encampment. But how we can actually make the theory transformative, how we can make the theory change it in a way that it wouldn't, it would itself get involved in the politics. It would inspire, it would give insight to the people how to make the change, the progressive change. I hope I'm making sense, right? So another problem that we have, which is very closely associated with this, is that okay, so first thing first, the theory has become too critical, but not adequately transformative, right? The second one, which is very closely related, is that theory has become too analytical. We analyze, okay, and we critically analyze, but theory is not adequately normative. Anybody knows what I might mean by normative? Setting norms means setting standards, ethical and moral standards. So something that is normative is something that sets ethical or judgmental standards. So you can judge if the society has become corrupt, if the system has become corrupt, if I have become corrupt or not. And so it's a moral, it's an ethical judgment. Okay, we sociologists, we have agreed long time ago, maybe since 60s, 70s. That was one of the consequences of the 60s and 70s, the roaring decades, right? We have become, I would say, aware that there is no such thing as value-free theory or value-free social sciences. We can't really leave the values behind, the room, outside the room of the lab, and think that everything is so analytical, and our values have nothing to do with the results of research or with the way we do the research. Okay, we know, when we acknowledge that our values influence our research, we're not going to hide it. So the objectivity that normally in physical sciences, in natural sciences, they look for, okay, that cannot be achieved here. We have a different type of objectivity here in social sciences and humanities. And that is secured by me in part of my lectures, or in part of in part of your essays or assignments, or in part of our books and articles, to transparently say, okay, I come from a socialist or Marxist or conservative background. I'm female. I'm white. I'm from the middle class. I'm male. I'm non-white. So on and so forth. So we acknowledge where we come from. We acknowledge our values, and we make them transparent. So the reader would see where my position comes from. So that would be exposed. That would be the subject for conversation. So the values are not kept. What happened? The values are not kept hidden or concealed. So the values are no longer kept hidden. But then there's still a problem here. Although we acknowledge that, and we say, for instance, under capitalism, the workers are exploited. And we prove that, this is the rate of their exploitation. This is what they should be paid, but they're not paid. And the money goes into the pocket of the capital owners, and we call it exploitation. But who says exploitation is bad? What if this exploitation is good for the entire system? What if this exploitation makes the entire system going? And why we should consider that exploitation is or justice is good? Well, that's a social scientist would say, well, let's just leave it to the people. I just prove that the workers in this country are exploited 100% or 50% or 200%. Okay, but then I leave it to the people. You guys go and make your mind. And if you think exploitation is bad, if you think you are part of those who have become exploited, have been exploited, then go and take the right action, political action, social action. Then they choose choose someone into the office that would kind of be nicer to the working class and so on and so forth. So it has nothing to do with me. Okay, so but now in this book, in this course, we're going to say no, it's not adequate. What if we bring the judgment into the analysis? Why we should leave the judgment out? Well, how we're going to do that? Would that be possible? Well, why not? Recently, I applied for promotion. Okay, in that promotion, I was supposed to benchmark myself. I'm applying for promotion to go to the next level. I have to prove to the university that over the last 2-3 years, I have been functioning as much as an average person in the next level has been functioning. I have to benchmark myself against the ones that have been already promoted. They have been more productive in the institution. So what that benchmarking means, I'm actually bringing judgment into my analysis of myself, right? So what if we do that in social sciences as well? What if we benchmark? You know, that's if you don't benchmark, you say within the current framework, even if we are exploited by 50%, still things are functional. It's better than the already collapsed communism. It's better than living under North Korean system. Okay, so because you have limited yourself to the current status quo, and your judgment is limited to the already existing situation. Within the already existing situation, it's not too bad, right? We can make things better, but it's not too dramatically bad. But if you make the judgment by making the comparison between the current status quo and what you think should be, okay? Think of human creativity. Imagine that societies are free, producers are free, they can come together, they can sit together, they can decide, they can plan, they can own the means of production, they collaborate with each other, and they produce things that really matters to their communities. And then use that as a way of benchmarking against the current situation where the working class has no autonomy, right? So then you say, okay, in that situation, in the optimum situation, in the ideal situation, we could have actually addressed this and this and this and this matters. But since we are not in that situation, we are actually failing to that. Even if we may sound like successful based on the standards that the current system has already set up, but we're far from being successful when we compare ourselves with the optimal, with the ideal situation. Then you might ask me, wouldn't this be idealism? Well, let that be idealism. Let's have a bit of idealism into our equations as well. Why we think idealism is a crime? Once upon a time, humans were dreaming of flying. They didn't call it idealism until they started to fly. And by the way, yes, part of that ideal is imaginary. But if you carefully think and if you carefully look at the history or the environment around you in other societies, you see there are elements of that ideal society already existing for many, many centuries. Humanity was not living under capital or capitalism. Humanities were living in, for 5,000 years, the research came out. For 5,000 years, after the invention of agriculture, people were still living for 5,000 years in cities that had no hierarchies. No ruling priest or no ruling chief or whatever. So, and was that past something just related to the past? No, you see many communities in third world societies, in indigenous communities that are still not very much touched or altered by the system. they have preserved that way of living, and they're fine. Well, I'm not saying that we have to all go back to the caves. We can be very selective. We can choose those technological advancements that can actually help us to become healthier. Why not? But most of that technology today is not to make us healthier. That's the problem. That's because we don't have control over them, because we don't own them. They are not meant to produce, to increase our well-being. They're meant to increase profits, the values of the shares and stocks and so on and so forth. So it's all about growth. So you can see that theory should become more transformative. That's the message. And also the theory should become more normative by incorporating our values. So values are, what are the values? Values are the ones that are set up by the system, the ruling system. There are values that communities pursue. Communism might have a different value to the system. The system's values economic growth, but the community values their welfare, their well-being, right? And also there are values that we still have to decide, we have to discuss, we have to bring the philosophers, ethicists, even religious people who are not corrupted by their institutions, and they think freely and democratically and openly. You have to bring everybody into a conversation to see what we should really value. Yes, okay, there's values that are things that are valued by the system, there are things that are valued currently by our communities. But what else? What are the other things that we should value more? So there are three levels of value. So that's why value is so central to make the social theory more normative. Value becomes the center of the universe because every society is motivated, incentivized, moved by what they value. No one moves towards something they don't value. So value is the driving force. Value is the underpinning of everything. So that's why value is so central. Let me jump to one of these slides down the track to, okay, we still have plenty of time, don't worry. Yes, look at this one. This is from the Communist Manifesto, written in the middle of 19th century by Marx and Engels. And this is the most famous quote from that text. And that text was a revolutionary. It happened in 1948, and when Europe was on turmoil. So the authors say the history of all hitherto existing society or previous societies is the history of class struggles. Freemen versus the slave, and etc. The working class versus the capitalist class, etc. The landlords versus the peasants, and so on and so forth. So they say the history is shaped, the history of every society is shaped by the conflict between the ones that rule and the ones that are ruled. Let's decode this, because Marx was also a value theorist. He tried to theorize value. By this he means, or they mean, Marx and Engels, they mean the society is divided between value makers and value takers, right? The ones that make valuable things, that make value in the society, things that are valued by the society, and the ones that take it from them and appropriate it, confiscate it for their own benefits because they have the upper hand. Okay, like the slave owner and the slave. The slave does the work, not the slave owner. The slave makes the produce in the farm, and the slave owner takes that produce. So the value embedded in that produce that comes from the labor of the slave is taken by the slave owner and then turned into more property. You can say the same thing in an industrial society that is ruled by the capitalist class and big corporations. You see the big difference between the value takers and value makers, and that conflict between them. It's a class of value makers and a class of value takers. And societies make sure that the value makers always think that they are dependent on value takers. Like in the old ages, when people were thinking that if the king dies, the whole world will end. So that is the situation that you can actually manufacture some kind of consent, and people would, or when people become so disappointed, again, make sure that they won't blame the value taking class. They would start think of, oh, it must be Russians or the immigrants, the bloody immigrants, or maybe it's the deepest state, right? The deepest state. So what is the deepest state? So I'm not against conspiracy because the world is full of conspiracies, but conspiracy theory means that we start to explain everything based on very unsubstantiated conspiracy theories, right? We try to explain everything based on conspiracies. Not that conspiracies don't exist. Actually, conspiracies become the ultimate cause of everything. You know, what is it? Trump shooting, right? Or it was all deep state and conspiracy. Maybe there were some people behind that, but then no one asks, where does that? Even if there is a deep state, might be. I don't think there is one deep state. There must be many of them. There must be a network of the corporations and estates trying to maintain their supremacy, right? And also groups of elites and so on and so forth. So it's a network of ruling classes and ruling groups that we may call them deep states. But again, the word state means that we're very anti-government and not pointing to the corporations. But anyway, so where does that deep state come from? Why we have ended up having deep state ruling or doing everything they want to do? So let's keep asking why. Let's keep asking why. Then here we realize that maybe it's because the way that we have set up social and economic relations and political relations that give birth to these deep states. That even if tonight I go and kill Bill Gates, tomorrow another Bill Gates will emerge, right? So that's why we need to pay more attention to how the system works, rather than thinking of the individuals that even if they die tomorrow morning, another person would easily replace that person or that group of elite people, right? So that would social theory would actually save us from falling into trap of conspiracy theories, of thinking about a secret society somewhere behind the current events. So okay, I think I agree with this guys. That's right. That's the struggle. A lot of time, these struggles are not there actually. You don't see people revolting against the capitalist class. We revolt against the immigrants, some of us, or we revolt against those who revolt against immigrants, right? But it's not all about yeah, some people think that the history is the struggle of ideologies. Ideologies are fighting each other. That determines history. That means you give too much weight to ideas and ideologies. Ideologies mostly represent the interests, invested or vested interests. But anyway, this is you will find it in the book. This is how I have tried to reformulate Marx and Engels' argument. The history of hitherto existing societies, and by extension, the henceforth ones, the previous one and the existing ones and the ones that come, is the history of two separate yet overlapping ideal types of a struggle. We have two types of struggles going on, guys, right? This is what we are saying. So One is between value makers and value takers, as Marx and Engels said, or within a dominant value regime. What could be that dominant value regime could be the Soviet style, a communist one. It could be a capitalist one. It could be a feudalistic or a slavery one. So we agree with them to this extent. Over the distribution of value, what the value that is produced, the value that is embedded in these goods and in or commodities, or the value that is represented by the money, we fight over it. Every 3 years, the workers of this university go into a kind of a negotiation or bargain with the management over the enterprise agreement for the next 3 years. And that's a constant fight, and that is a peaceful one, fortunately, because we live under kind of a democratic society compared to a non-democratic one that could be very bloody. But there is also another struggle going on, and that struggle is about, hey guys, what value is, what should be valued? Okay. So if you don't think of the second struggle, you are always trapped in the first struggle. Why we should value stuff that we don't need? Why we should value too much economic growth? Why we should value too much wealth? Whereas much more important things like the community well-being or quality of life is more important to us, maybe, or the ecological well-being, because it's not just us humans, but also more than humans, extra humans, other non-human living beings, and so on and so forth. So the real struggle, the one that now social theory should focus on, is the second struggle. We want to redefine value. We just don't want to say, okay, we accept that value is in the money that represents the stuff that we do, the things that we do. We want to make sure that value is determined or defined by us, that would suit us as the community. Because when even you look at Marx, okay, who could be more critical than Marx? An anarchist, maybe? Of capitalism, right? But even Marx accepted the definition of value, the capitalist definition of value. His problem was that, okay, value comes from the labor, goes into the commodity is taken over by the owner, the manufacturer or owner or the manager or whatever, and then it is sold in the market and is taken by them, and the working class is underpaid, underprivileged, exploited. You see, Marx is very critical of that system, but Marx is still playing the game within the parameters of the system. Marx doesn't come up with a new definition of value. You're saying, if you come with a new definition of value, what would you say? We said, well, not only the value within the capitalist system is taken from us and we are exploited, but also we are deprived of defining value ourselves. Because if it was left to us, we wouldn't have been doing this game. We would have been doing something different. We would have been making decisions and planning the productions and our relations in a way that everybody would benefit equally. The whole society would benefit equally. That we wouldn't go and transgress or transpass the planetary boundaries and making the planet suffer for the sake of a few capitalists to enjoy their yachts and mansions and the values of their stock markets and so on and so forth, which has nothing to do with humanity's health or ecological health. So you see that this is the real struggle that we have to focus on. And if that is the real struggle, then what are the consequences of that for social theory then? And the social theory should sit back and say, okay, let's now differentiate between true value, that's what the book does, true value and the fetish value. What is the fetish or fake value? The fetish or fake value is the one that is imposed on us. That we are made to think it's a good thing, but it's not a good thing. That's why we call it fetish. like an idol, worship, right? But the true value is the one that we could do it, and we sometimes do it actually at home. Who would just charge their family members for caring for them? No one, right? A lot of exchanges, a lot of interactions that happens in the household, in the communities, in less capitalistic societies, happens through the production of true value. It's not that it's something imaginary in the minds of someone who tries to think a utopia. My father was born in a village, and sometimes I go visit my parental my families over there. And whenever I go, then invite me to the dinner. Everybody from that community comes to the dinner. And they see them. So everyone, one is for all, and all for is one. That's the kind of their community, their society lives like a commons. Are you familiar with the concept of commons? What is a commons? Can you? Like a forestry, like an ecosystem, like a fishery, right? Like a pond. It's an ecosystem where everybody contributes something to and benefits from. All societies are functioning like commons, and that action is called commoning. By commoning means that you benefit from the society and you contribute to the society to the extent you benefit from the society to the extent, or the system to the extent that you would not undermine the capacity of that society to reproduce itself. So if there's think of a community, or think of a forest, you know, the bees do their job, they benefit, they collect pollen and take it home and turn it into honey, and then the bear comes and takes some of that honey, but the bear's not going to kill all the bees or destroy all the hives. They just eat as much as they would help them survive, but also they're not going to hurt the bees. Or and the same with, so every creature contributes something, and they also benefit from that without trespassing the capacities of that system to reproduce itself. So the whole life is like a commons. If you look at the life, the reason that life could actually flourish on this planet was through the collaboration mostly. Yes, there are some competitions, but these competitions are regulated, are limited. Most of it is dominated through collaboration, cooperation, and so on and so forth. So yes, you will become more familiar with the concept of commons and commoning, because as you will later see, true value actually comes from the commons. Wherever you have commons, the true value comes. Like a society, like a household. Your household is a little commons. You don't just bring some chickens and then they would lay eggs, and then you take the eggs to the house and just charge everyone for the eggs. You all contribute to the well-being of your household, and the same with the communities. But capitalism makes us isolated. Capitalism takes people off their land, makes them separated from their land, from their resources. The only thing they have, the only thing these people have, most of the people, is their mental capacity and their manual capacity. And that's the only thing that they have to take to the market, to the labor market, to sell. And as a result of that, they may get a bit of a wage or something in return, so to survive. So those connections, those communal connections, those commons are broken down. That's what capitalism does. That's what by changing the value. So that's why instead of producing true value through commons and commoning, we have ended up producing fetish value, which is embedded in this commodities that are not that useful. The whole system has changed the way that value is defined, the way that value is determined. Am I making sense, or things are getting a little bit too heavy? Okay. Just remember things of what I said. You just heard. will just sit somewhere in your subconscious, and you don't need to try to hold on to them. We'll come back to them, and we try to expand on them, and I hope that we also be challenging each other, so we will be able to think more carefully and more concretely. You should challenge me to give you more examples, and I should challenge you to give me more examples, and so on and so forth. Okay. Yeah. The slides are not that that's critical. I mean, and just the summary of the email I sent you, that the course has a new design, and there's the core text is this the book. Interactive learning is important, and I hope that we will see more of that from next week, hopefully. And we want to build the course together. This is the first time, so I will be very much dependent on you to tell me how we can improve the course, especially if it's too late for this this semester, maybe for the next one. Yeah, I mean, some ideas came to my mind, and I put them into the assignments. I don't know really if they would work or not. Sorry, but let's see. Let's we go through try and error, right? You may come back to me and say, "Oh, that was too bad, too complex." And unfortunately, you see, there's I haven't been able to give you a list of recommended resources. I'll provide more as we move forward. But because unfortunately you're the first group of people doing this course in the way that it's designed, so I'll be dependent on you helping me find good resources that we can recommend to the next year students to use, and so on and so forth. So the way that I hope that would be accepted by you and would work is that we would like to read before the class, okay, then discuss at the class, in the class, and then write, okay. The writing, as you could see, I've tried to integrate the assignments into weekly writing activities. Because if you look at the workload and work hours of each course, it's not just limited to that 2 hours that we come to the class. We're supposed to spend some time beyond that class time. So read prior to the class, come for a discussion, questions, comments, challenge me, let's challenge each other. Let's try to decode. There could be sentences that I have put into the book, but I forgot what I meant by that, because it's a short book, and I had to compress about 100,000 into 50,000, and I couldn't, yeah, in that very limited time I had, I couldn't think of many examples. So it was kind of very abstract thinking. As I have said in the book, this book is the first edition of the first volume of a series. So the second edition would be very much dependent on what we discover through our conversation. And that would be something that really be thankful to you for any contribution, any ideas. Nothing is really naive or simplistic. Anything that you say can actually spark a new conversation that would help me when I rewrite the second edition. Okay. So possibly I might be more dependent on you than you on me. No, honestly. Yes, the way that again I tried to structure the course, the weekly schedule, and you can see we go chapter by chapter, and it is divided between three modules, 3 parts. The first module, or the first part of the semester, and then from week 1 to week 4, we concentrate on chapters 1, apart from the preface, chapter 1, which is an introduction, and chapter 2. And we mostly want to argue why it is necessary to have a theory, that is theory of value, that is not only analytical, but also normative. I think we have already said that. We already mentioned why that is necessary. But we want to put that into writing, and you see that I have design and assignment instruction. I have even, if you go to the website, you find a document in the assessment number 1, assignment number 1. You download it into your computer, and it has part A, part B, part C. We start from part A, so that I hope that just after the class you will start writing part A. As much as you find the resources for it, as much as you're capable of developing ideas out of reading the book, and so on and so forth. And we bring it back to the class, we discuss and see how we can improve their writing. So it's not about competition between us, right? The peer conversation would be very essential. We want to learn from each other. I don't mind if everybody gets HD or not. So why I should think that only 10% should get HD and only, I don't know, 30% D, and then another 30% must be credit. And so let's go for HD, everyone. So let's help each other. Yes, so that would be the first part. So have a look at the first assignment. Don't look at the second and the third, you will be too scared. So just leave it to when you gain some self-confidence after submitting your first assignment. But it's not too bad to have a quick look, just to get a sense, or overall sense. And then the second module, it's the shortest one. It's only chapter 3 and 4 rich, and it's like a little open question quiz. You will be given 4 questions. They must be already there, and you just read the text, chapter 4 and 5. You try to answer those questions. Okay, so that would what is the the second module? What's the purpose of the second module? Okay, in the first module, we become familiar with social theory, value, the theory of value, and so on and so forth, and capitalism. So it's conceptual, right? The second one, we want to have to develop this analytical skills. Well, what do I mean by analytical? When we do analysis, we're interested in finding cause and effects, right? The cause and effects sound like very mechanical in engineering, but we also have them in social sciences. Unfortunately, since 60s and 70s, one of the downsides of that revolution was that we started to stereotype causal thinking as if it's a mechanical thing. Even the term mechanisms comes from mechanical engineering and those sorts of sciences. And it's not very well received amongst sociologists. If you think of Michel Foucault and Bourdieu and Boudin and all the postmoderns and so on and so forth, the current ones that have shaped the destiny of social sciences to this moment, they're very interpretive. They look at the society as if it's a text. I admire them. I admire them a lot. But the downside, every theory, every tradition, every paradigm has a downside, has a weakness as well. And their weakness is that they look at the society and the social reality as a text, and like a priest, they sit back and interpret it. Okay, that interpretation, well, it's very good, but you see that lots of language game going on. You know, the choice of concept, the choice of language is so important. If you change the wording, you see you end up somewhere else. And you don't understand where things come from, why we are in this situation. The why question is forgotten. It's all about how things have happened, or how things are happening. So it have become, social sciences have become very super interpretive rather than explanative. And they call it explanation, but it's not explanation. It's mostly interpretation. Why? Why it's mostly interpretation? Because we're dealing with the way how people think or behave, not why they think this way, right? To do that, you have to look back, look deeper into the social structures and the mechanisms and processes and consequences and so on and so forth, to see why this emerges in the words of people, in the minds of people. Reality is socially constructed, yes, we agree, but that doesn't mean this table is not going to be here or exist because I don't think about it, right? It's because, yes, the reality is there. The only way we relate ourselves to the reality of, for instance, this table is through my mind and thinking, and behaving and interactions with each other. But still, the reality out there influences the way we think, and the way we think influences the reality. So the existence of reality should be acknowledged. And that's why we call this an ontological term in social sciences. That has happened recently. So in the 60s and 70s, it was epistemological term. Foucault started talking about discourses, languages, right? But now, or for Bourdieu, culture became so central, because they were the children of, they were the baby boomers. They were the children of welfare state. Their ancestors were working class being the screwed, but they were not themselves the screwed anymore. So their basic needs were satisfied, these rich social scientists, even if they sounded very revolutionary. But because they were benefiting from the welfare state, their concern became their identity. That, I'm not saying identity is not important. Identity is still important, yes. But the material basis of the way that identity is formed is also important. The way that we deal with the matter through our identity is important. At the end of the day, we all need the food to eat, right? Regardless. So that's why there is another term coming that is called ontological. Ontology means existence. We want to acknowledge that reality exists. It's not only in the minds of us and shaped through our interactions. And therefore we want to explore that existence, that totality of reality in its totality, so everything is interconnected. Not only our views and ideas, but also our views and ideas are shaped by our agency, the way we act, but also our agency is shaped by the structures that already exist, like institutions, norms, values, etc., etc. The political power, the establishment, etc., the power relations, and the power relations are also influenced by ideas and people's agencies. So it's like a triangle. Think of a triangle. One part of it, one point of it is the cognition, ideas. The other one is human agency, and the other side, the third one, is the structures. So that interaction between ideas, structure, and agency is an ontological term. Now, what we are arguing through this book is another term in social sciences. We call it axiological term, which means bringing the values and judgments into the analysis and saying, well, okay, we're going to benchmark ourselves against our ideals and wishes and see where we are. Okay, so this is called axiological. Axiology means, the judgments, ethics, morality, into the equation. So we're pushing for another 10 in social sciences, and I'm trying to be one of those people who is trying to do that. I don't know how would that be received by you. Let's see. Okay, so mechanisms are important. Causality is important, although the type of causality we see in social science is different to natural sciences. And then the third one, after learning the concepts and the skills to analyze, okay, we want to apply it on something real, which the book has not done. So this is something in extension. In the third module, we want to think of a sector, right? It could be energy sector, it could be food sector, food production sector, and compare two types of activities, one done by corporations and how fetish value is produced by that, and how people are exploited, how nature is exploited, and it could be also nice things in there, who knows, but also you can think of alternative ways of doing food production, or alternative ways of doing energy production. Think of, there are, it's not just in our imagination, there are towns that have taken control of the renewable energy production. They have created a commonwealth, and of course they have also had to buy some money from the big corporations maybe, but anyway, or some subsidies from the state, but then they have the control over the energy production, and so on and so forth. So it's not just one side very bad, the other side very good. There are also interactions with them. They had to also, when you do I don't know, a solar punk city or something, you still have to buy some of your stuff and technology from some corporations. And then corporations or capitalism would also say, okay, maybe I have failed this society in terms of providing with their needs. Let them look after themselves. That would lessen the burden of the crisis on me. Let the rubbish that I create and the pollution I create to be cleaned up by them, and then they would think of it as something autonomous for themselves. So you see that it's not all black and white. So we want to see in that sector how true value is produced, how fetish value is produced, how they interact, what are the strategies that the true value side might be might use in order to reverse or restore the well-being of their environment and their communities, and so on and so forth. So it would be something we try to relate what we have learned in the first module and the second module to the reality in the third module. That would be a challenge. Let's consider that assignment a tentative and see when we progress, if we might be able to change it a bit to make it more workable. Yes, because we start thinking about those things from the first assignment. So it's not like that you leave it until the third assignment. Okay. Yes. This is the ugly part. 35% for the first assignment, 25% for the second, 45% of the total grade for the third one. Yeah, you can download these documents. Yes. Yeah, I'll try to make the text as more accessible as possible. But as I have said here in red lines, please help me, because if you come without much of adequate reading, even if you find it not very accessible, still you just take a note and put in or maybe take note of your question or whatever, or criticism. Say, well, this paragraph really doesn't make any sense. That would still help. That would still help, because I see that, okay, well, this part needs more attention. This part is what I have to explain further. So I'll be very much dependent on you. If you don't come kind of prepared, I'll find myself walking in a dark room without a torch. So I may hit anywhere. So just help me find my way through your feedback, your questions, your comments, your criticisms. You challenge me, please. Yes, I think I have already. Or maybe you have a look. I mean, just it's a bit of a background where the word capital comes from, and what do we mean by? Oh, we still have 30 minutes. Is there any question up to this point before I continue? All good. Okay. Yeah, this is slides. See, they're a little bit different to the other slides. These ones are taken from the other course, SOCA 2400. In the second week, we talk about capitalism, what capitalism is. Because it seems that people have different understanding of capitalism. It's important to make sure that we're on the same page and we share the same understanding of capital. Um, well, I'm not saying that one definition is better than other definitions, but we have to end up choosing one that would become the base for the discussions. Otherwise, the conversation can go in different directions. So how would you guys define capitalism compared to a non-capitalist system or society? What are the boxes that you would tick to say that I live under capitalism? Or 80% capitalism, or 90%?
If profitization is a factor within like trading or buying commodities.
Okay, can you expand a bit? Profitization?
Yeah, if that has a factor in how we live and like react and act within the economy.
Okay, so the way that profit is made influences the way that people behave. And yes, okay, it's a very dominant, it's a very determining factor in that society. People's behavior is very much shaped by the way that profit is made. Is that what you mean? Okay. Well, that could be one aspect. Yes, go ahead.
I'd also say that, in my opinion, capitalism is shaped by everything being about profit and growth, and if we keep going and more, there's not really capture it.
Yeah. Okay.
On the other hand, whereas like I don't know, more socialist structures are they're fine with some standard and they don't need more or more shiny things. Yeah. So that's kind of the biggest difference in life.
Yes, okay. Profit motive, economic growth being the driving force, money, making more money. Okay, wealth bringing more wealth. That's the center of the universe for that system.
The distribution of wealth and
the
existence of the class system.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone being equal.
Very, very important. Yes, who owns and who doesn't own, and who controls, who doesn't control, the divisions in the societies. Yes. Yes. That's a very important point. And it is also goes back to one of the aspects of value, because it's not just the labor, but also the communal connection. When you take off the workers, off their land and access to their resources, that's the primitive accumulation. That's called primitive accumulation that happened. It was not just didn't happen just in Europe when capitalism was emerging. It's constantly happening. The land grabbing in Africa, the American and the European and even the Chinese and Russian companies, rushing into Africa, in Amazonia, in Latin America to grab land and to dislocate many peasants and indigenous people off their lands, off their resources, and that then they become city dwellers and so on and so forth, and they have nothing else but selling their labor, and then they find themselves in isolation, atomistic, atomized. And it's ongoing. That conviviality, that solidarity should be broken. Because that's one of the ways that actually capital can rule. In this university again, I was elected as the academic senate member. So people voted and I was elected a few years ago. I wrote back to the people upstairs and asked them to inform the constituency that I'm elected and give their list of the email list to me So I would inform them that I'm elected and thank them. Thank you for voting for me, and I'm for you. Just so here's my email. Yeah, communicate me whatever you want me to table at the Senate, academic Senate. They said no. Why? Because it could be, the list could be used for all sorts of purposes, as if I'm a criminal or something. So I had to go through the website and take the painstaking job of finding emails one by one and put them into a list and send a thank you message to everyone. And when I sent that, the message came from some people thanking me. You're the first one who have actually written back to us, telling us that you were elected and you're there for us. So and then I asked myself, why these communications between the members of an institution that is not even corporation is a taboo. So when the messages comes, you can't reply back. You can't have that conversation going on with the rest of your cohort comrades. So you have to do it through the union, and then the union has no access to the non-member list, and so on and so forth. So you see that this atomization, this atomistic kind of fabric is there as well. Okay, what else? Anything else? I think we must have touched. Yes, yes. Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think we're on the same page. I don't need to go through this. We have a good understanding of what capitalism is, because there's a big misunderstanding. I don't know if you have talked to people around you, the ones who haven't done social sciences, maybe, asking them to what they think of capitalism. Most of people think that it's free enterprise, a small businesses getting in transaction with each other and so on and so forth. But this is not capitalism. This is, in many non-capitalist societies, it's not like private property being the most determining factors in many societies, in the Islamic civilization, the Asian civilizations. Limited private property. People own their houses in extended family groups, but still they own that. They own their lands, and they own their stock. So no, so it's the ownership, private ownership is not really the or small businesses, doing exchanges with each other. It's not really the defining element of capitalism. You have to look at the history of capitalism, that primitive accumulation has happened. People's lands and resources have been confiscated and turned into capital for investment and for trade. Colonialism has played a significant role. We're not blaming capitalism for everything bad that happens. There are two other siblings to that: colonialism and what modernism. And these two things, these three, the unholy trinity of capitalism, colonialism, and modernism, they have worked together. And again, that's one of the other problems of social theory, is that it has become compartmentalized. We have social theories so obsessed with capital, like the Marxists, and including myself, and the ones that are so obsessed, like Max Weber and the tradition of Max Weber, those who followed his legacy. They're very much into modernism and modernity, the iron cage, and so on and so forth. Bureaucracy, George Ritzer's McDonaldization of the society. And the third one are especially the ones that come from the South. They're very much colonialist. So they're very much obsessed with colonialism, and they forget the influence of capital, and they forget the influence of modernism. They don't pay enough attention, or they don't give enough weight to the other two. So one of the advantages of this communist not communist, communist value theory in this book is that, yes, our focus will be on capital. Yes, we agree. But the way we redefine it, the way we define value and capital, we make it possible to connect to colonialism and to connect to modernism. And you will see how, because we expand the definition of value from just focusing on the labor and production, by including the so-called nature and communal bonds that we call conviviality, and also the politics, the governance, and setting up the ultimate goals. So this way we make sure that our definition of capital would very openly and dynamically would be flexibly would be connected to colonialism when we were into that business, and modernity or modernism. So yes, our focus will be on capital, but in a different way. So the profit motive, the value makers versus value takers, the profit imperative that you mentioned, the division as you mentioned, markets are the imperfect markets is another aspect of it. The social and ecological externalities, and anything that is social and ecological according to under the capital is treated like an externality. And a corporation causing pollution in the environment, it's up to the community, it's up to the government to look after that. Or if they do any rehabilitation of the mining sites, it's so superficial. You just put some topsoil and then plant a few plants in there, and then they disappear, and then after a few years you see that, oh, those plants are gone. It's as the rest of the society should clean up the mess. They take the credit, and they always claim capitalism is successful. See, we're always successful. We always make profit. We always grow. Whereas the other people are taking the burden and they suffer. They're not included in their accounts of their success or failure. Okay, I think I'm done. Not much. Okay, there is also a bit of this, you can also watch some of those YouTubes, and one of them is by David Gonio or something. He's a young boy. He does a very good job. It's his YouTube channel is called Theory and Philosophy, and he makes very sophisticated books and philosophies very accessible. I like him. I have shared it's a short one. He's very good at making things simple. He compares Adam Smith and David Ricardo and Marx and their understandings of value. That should be enough. Also in this slide, you find a few of these definitions that, value, how people define value. Yeah, we have, I think we have kind of in agreement about what capital is, but also considering that capital is the value under capitalism and determines value. And so value is so foundational. As also, there's a very famous quote from Marx that we have to focus on value because it's value that is foundational to capital. And for the rest of the reasons we already discussed, so value is, even if many people have tried to deal with value as if it's an analytical tool or concept, it's very ideological. And if you look at the trajectory of the way that value has been defined, first by mercantilists. So, mercantilists, anyone is familiar with the mercantilists? They were during the European colonialist time, 16th to 18th century, on the heydays of colonialism. They were the ones that were saying that we have to minimize the imports of products, raw materials should come through the colonialist channels on very cheap. And then we have to maximize the export. And for this, we need to have the iron fist of the state looking after the corporations that go and exploit other nations and impose our goods on them. So it was colonialism 101 ideology. So that's why their source of value for them is the gold that they were stealing from the other nations, the money they were making, and the balance of trade. So these things were the signs of the more you exploit others, and the more you colonize, the more you bring their wealth to yours, the more you run a positive trade balance with them. Like Trump wants to have that with China. China wants to have that with America. So there's a kind of a mercantilism still going on actually. So they want they're based on their point of view, these are the sources of value. Okay. So and that explains why they think these are the sources of value. These are the ones that should be valued. But then at the time when Adam Smith in the 19th century, 18th century, when Adam Smith came and an industrial revolution happened in Britain, Scotland, then okay, if colonialism and stealing other nations' wealth is value, why Spain's is poorer than Britain? Because Spain had already passed that heydays, and it started to decline as a colonial power. So it must be something else. It must be something else. So the physiocrats said it must be the land agriculture, because they were very much, their interest was very much tied to the landlords. And so they said, well, the value actually comes from the land, the productive land. And we humans, the laborers, the peasants, we only transform that value from what is naturally available into something consumable. We're just transformers. The real value is in the land. So whoever has more land and control over productive land, they're wealthy. They have more value. Okay, so that's the source of value for them. But then the industrialization happened, industrial and scientific revolution happens, and then Adam Smith, of course, from Scotland, England, Britain, he comes with the idea that actually value comes from the real wealth is in real production. So the more you produce the stuff, complex stuff, and sell them, the more wealth you have. So he wrote the book, the Wealth of Nations, right, to explain where the wealth comes and who is wealthy and who is not wealthy, and how we can actually determine the value of things. And he ended up actually paying attention to labor, to the toil and trouble. These are his words. The toil and trouble that goes into the production of the goods, that's the source of value. But he didn't consider that, because that is the source of value, so the worker should be rewarded more. He said, well, that's a cost to the capital. Okay, that's part of the cost. So whoever brings the capital, they should take their share. Who has the land, the factory is built on, should take the rent. The capitalists should take the interest as a return on their capital, and the laborers should get the wage because of their contribution. And so it was not that, but he was the first person to consider labor as the source of value. He says, okay, well, these guys say, well, actually, the nature can't turn itself to a table or chair. It's the laborer that does that, and the person that will invest in it. So the real value comes from the labor, because nature can't turn itself to a chair or a table or a computer. By the way, there was no computer at the time. Ricardo followed him. He paid more attention to the way that the labor plays a role, so he made the labor more central to the theory. But he said, he faced this question: if the real value, if the value comes from labor, why the laborers are so poor? Then he blamed the rent seekers, the ones that have land, and then they say, okay, they're the ones that we have to actually consider, demonize them, and we have to consider capitalists and laborers on one side, landowners on the other side. So the landowners are the bad guys. They're not productive. They're not productive because they only rent out their land, and so the real value is in labor. Then Marx comes, and Marx says, okay, well, let's take a closer look at why the laborers are or workers are poor, even if we all agree that the value comes from labor, but why they are poor? They are poor because of the system, the capitalist system itself, because they go to work, and if, for instance, 10 people of these workers, it's enough for them to work 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, to make enough money to look after their families, they will happily do that. But they don't do, because they will end up working 14 hours or 10 hours a day, seven days a week. So who takes the rest of it? So he called it surplus value. So he's the one who invented the idea of surplus value that is taken by the capitalist owner, and the workers can't take that because they don't own the means of production. And he says where the means of production and its ownership comes from. It comes from when you took people off their resources. Those money that capitalist has and brings to the equation or invest, that money doesn't come from out of their labor. It comes from those primitive accumulation of the wealth in their families. So if you just tell Marx that Elon Musk worked his way hard to become rich, he would just laugh. He would just say that's a single case and anecdotal. So he also pays attention to mother nature. This is very sexist language, unfortunately. It used to be the case. Father labor and mother nature. But he acknowledged nature plays a role, but he was in agreement. You see that he was still in agreement that nature doesn't really have, the nature doesn't add value, has a value, but it's the laborer that adds value to it, because nature can't turn itself to a computer, right? So then came marginalists, and then they said, okay, it's all about what determines the value is the price. Who cares about how much work has gone into a table or not, building a table or not? At the end of the day, it's the market that determines the value of. So it's the price that determines the value. And what determines the price? People's preferences, their subjective preferences. So if they're in love with this type of table or in this kind of fashion, they just put the names of a famous football player on a shampoo, they'll go for it. So that's their subjective, supply and demand that determines the value of things. Well, then actually Marx and Smith and Ricardo, they knew about that. They said, well, let's imagine the supply and demand for this coffee is at the balance, right? But still this has a price, this has a value. Where does that come from? Okay, so if we're in the equilibrium, supply meets the demand, still this has a price. Supply and demand explain the fluctuations in the values, in the prices. They don't explain where the real value comes from, the natural value comes from. It comes from the cost of hiring the laborers and buying the stuff and so on and so forth. So therefore, the most dominant of today is this marginalist. You go to any economic and business school, they will teach you this poisonous idea. They talk about supply and demand and those sort of things. Then socialists and Marxist feminists came on board more recently, and then they said, well, yes, we talk a lot about labor making things and making values, but who makes the laborers? Women, of course. And this reproductive labor that goes on, the community that not only just women, also the community that provides people with education, with the skills, with knowledge, the knowledge that comes from the community. Even the public sector, the state also plays a role. So why we're not taking that into equation? They're also sources of value. And then the eco-feminists and eco-socialists came and said, wait, how about the nature? Why not bringing nature back into the equation and considering nature as a source of value as well? And then we've got the new interpretations, post-Marxists and autonomists. They're not that important, but we'll deal with them later in the book and in the course. But that's you see that the trajectory of the value theories, and you see how they are strongly related to the ideologies, because value is so normative itself, because it's so ideological. What could be more value laden than value itself? And how stupid it is, to treat value as if it has no value, it has no normative or ethical or moral component to it, and just treat it as if it's an analytical concept to analyze the society. So we see that we acknowledge the ideology behind it, and now we come on board and we say we're the communists. We think it's all the above. It's all the above. It's nature, it's labor, it's society and community, and it's the politics. Okay, so it's all together. And see if we can develop a theory that brings all of these disputes, all of this noise, the good ones, the positive ones, the progressive ones, into one equation. And that would become commonism, because it's based on the commons, what we share in our ideologies. So this theory also potentially has the power to bring the feminists and the working class fighters and environmentalists and all sorts of progressive forces into one table to discuss, to analyze, and to set the path forward. Okay, I'm sorry I talked too much today, but I hope that this might have helped you better understand the course and what we're going to do, and also made you more interested, not more intimidated. And I'll see you next week as well. So by next week, we'll have the drafts on the first part A of the first assignment to discuss. That helps because you don't need to wait until the deadline. So chapter one, and just a start. Doesn't matter what you put in there. Just a start. Whatever you put, that would be very helpful. And then we work together. All the best. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. See you.